Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, and today, it's been a long time coming, but I am very excited to finally be taking a look at the Rapido GNR Stirling Single. A very popular model this one, and I can't wait to dive into the details. But I do just want to mention ahead of time, because obviously I do some video work for Rapido now and again, that they haven't sponsored this video or had any say over it at all. I bought this model myself, so it's not a freebie. All the opinions in this video are my own, and in fact, you'll see later on that I did have some issues with this model, which I'm going to talk about in full. So hopefully that will be enough to prove that I'm not being paid by Rapido in any way to only say positive things. While I'm not sponsored by them though, this video has kindly been sponsored by Model Rail Inventory, brand new supporters of the channel, and I'll be talking about what they do and why you might find them really useful later on in the video. And as always, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. There's lots of reviews like this to enjoy, plus tutorials, full layout builds. Basically, if you like model railways, I promise there'll be something for you to enjoy, so click that subscribe button so you don't miss out. Anyway, let's get on with the review, because I'm sure you're all excited to see what this model has in store for us. So, we'll start off with the specs. As you know, this is the Rapido Stirling Single, originally produced for locomotion models back in 2018. Now that Rapido UK has been established, the model has returned to the range due to popular demand, and is now being done with both the original high tender version and also the low tender version, which I've got here, and this represents how the real locomotive looked from 1938 through to 2012. The model has a 21-pin decoder socket for DCC, plus some extra features like the firebox LED, a pre-fitted speaker, and also a stay alive included on all models too. Obviously, that only works if you're running on DCC, but it's nice to have it included. The RRP for the Stirling Single is £249.95, which comes to around £225 at the retailers. This is a sound-fitted model though, which has the higher RRP of £349.95, and that comes to about £300 at the retailers. And yes, this is an expensive model, but interestingly, the price hasn't increased all that much since the first release back in 2018. I believe back then the RRP was around £230, which at the time was pretty expensive for a model. I mean, it still is to a certain extent. Obviously, our expectations around what a model costs has significantly changed since then, but the price for this model has only increased by about £20. And in fact, considering that originally I believe it was only available from locomotion at the full RRP, now that you can buy it at the retailers, at least for the low tender version like I've got here, it's actually £5 cheaper than the original price when you consider the retailer's discount. And Rapido haven't just re-released the old version either, they've made some upgrades to the decoration, I think. The sound profile has also been completely redone as well, and they've added things like the stay alive that I mentioned earlier. You know, it would have been very easy for them to have just trotted out the original model again, considering how popular it was, and I think a lot of people would have been very happy with that. So well done to Rapido for keeping the prices realistic while also continuing to improve the model. With the specs out of the way though, let's take a look at the Stirling Single, and I think we can all agree that this is a truly stunning model from Rapido. It absolutely lives up to the museum quality finish that this loco is well known for, and it feels like every angle reveals something new to admire. Obviously, the standout feature is that enormous single driving wheel. It's such a distinctive feature, and it looks absolutely phenomenal in motion or even just on display like this. The paint finish is gorgeous in that classic Great Northern green livery, and then we've got the lining on the boiler bands, which are finely printed and really crisp. There's more white lining around each of the cutouts on the splashes for the large driving wheel, and this helps to draw even more attention to this area. The cutouts themselves are beautifully done, they're clean and precise, and it's nice to be able to see through to the large driving wheel. This will become a bit more evident when it's in motion later on. You might just be able to see that there's even a builder's plate on the running board here. At least I think it's a builder's plate. It's so small, it's barely readable. I can't actually see what it says, but I think on the close-up it might actually be legible, which is just incredible. And I do love the way that the running board curves up around this area too. It's an elegant and complex shape, and it's been captured really nicely. It's super impressive to see this kind of fidelity in a ready-to-run model. It honestly looks more like a custom-built showpiece. Adding to the appeal is the red lining that runs neatly along the edge here, adding an extra splash of colour and definition. The red lining then flows all the way back to the cab area, where you'll spot a neatly applied number 1 printed on the side here in that nice GNR lettering. Further lining then wraps around the cab itself, continuing up and over the roof in what is really quite an unusual design compared to what we usually expect to see on a steam loco. Moving back to the tender, the level of decoration here doesn't drop off at all. It's finished just as beautifully as the rest of the model. We've got the bold GNR lettering printed clearly on the tender sides, again in the same style as before. That's paired with more black and white lining around the edges. And then looking closely, you'll also notice that there's actually a different shade of green used in this area, and along the top and bottom a wealth of finely moulded rivets, which are absolutely tiny. These rivets continue on underneath, with the underframe showing just as much attention to detail. And the red lining makes another appearance too, surrounding the cutouts on the frame and the axle boxes. It's also on the steps up to the cab, as you would imagine as well. In fact, the whole underframe has loads of detail to be seen throughout this entire area. Of course, the giant driving wheel still remains the visual centerpiece, but the metal motion is nicely engineered. That said, I did run into a bit of trouble here. So the first model I received developed an issue while running in, where it sheared off at the point where it connects to the piston rod. I did take a little bit of footage when it happened, so you can see here just what the issue was. It was quite dramatic initially, as everything really jammed up and it made a big loud bang, but luckily I did manage to get it released before it did any further damage. I bought this from Rails of Sheffield, so I contacted them initially about it. They said to send it back, and I believe they repaired it in-house themselves. Unfortunately, when the repaired loco returned to me, I ran it in again and exactly the same thing happened. Same side, same piston. So yeah, I have to admit this was very frustrating. The second time around, I decided to send it back directly to Rapido, which to be honest is probably what I should have done initially, as they have a really good warranty department. They opted to replace the entire model, and since it's come back, I've had absolutely no problems at all. So yeah, third time lucky. Thankfully, I've not had any issues with it since then. And I know some YouTubers would use this as an excuse to start loudly complaining about inherent issues with the design or something like that. But honestly, I think this was just an isolated issue with my particular model. Yeah, it's frustrating, especially when it happens twice in a row. But honestly, the way Rapido dealt with it was just fantastic. You literally couldn't ask for better. And to be clear, I didn't get any special treatment here because of my affiliation with them. I used the same Rapido warranty form on their website that everybody else would. But knowing the people at Rapido, I know how much time and effort they put into their customer support to keep people happy. Having now gone through the process myself, it's really efficient, and in comparison to when I had that issue with the Accurascale Class 31 a while back, you know, it took over a month to get the parts for that, which I then had to fit myself. Once I sent this loco back to Rapido, I think a fully working version was back with me in about a week, so yeah, really efficient, and I think they had an exhibition in that time as well, so I don't know how they managed to turn it around so quickly. But yeah, like I said, I'm sure I'd get more views if I went off on a big rant here, but as I've said in the past, I think being able to report back my experiences on getting something repaired and replaced like this is much more valuable information for you guys, if slightly less entertaining perhaps. But yeah, if you do ever have an issue with a Rapido model, just send it back to them and you can be sure it'll be dealt with properly. Putting that aside though, the detail around the cylinders themselves is excellent. You might notice the front splashes are missing on the model straight out of the box, but don't worry, they are included separately in the detail bag. You basically have the choice on whether to fit these yourself, depending on whether you feel your layout's curves are wide enough to accommodate them. So again, nice of Rapido to include these rather than just missing them off entirely. We also get some additional details like pipework, a toolbox, metal chain couplings, and also a tension lock coupling for the front of the model. And speaking of the front of the Stirling Single, the detail continues to impress here too. There's a nice lamp iron, a separately fitted handrail, and the smokebox door with the dart are both highlighted with that nice touch of silver too. One thing that caught my eye is the shape of the front of the frames here. It has a soft flowing curve that really suits the overall elegant design of this loco. Moving further down, the buffer beam is neatly finished and includes another number 1 printed nice and clearly there. And as you would expect, the Stirling Single is also fitted with sprung buffers, which are a welcome feature on a model of this caliber. We have a standard NEM coupling pocket too for those who might want to do some tender first running, and the guard irons either side too, which I've just noticed as well. Looking back along the Stirling Single, there's a nice tall chimney that really finishes off the look of this loco. Just ahead of the cab we have the safety valve cover and whistle, which are both picked out in a nice gold. The cab windows are nicely glazed, and like I said before, the cab itself is quite unique with that unusual roof shape. I love the way it just curves up and over, which adds a lot of character to the loco. And a nice feature that is becoming more common on our models is that the loco and tender can be disconnected. In fact, when you receive the model, you will have to join the two halves before running it. Pulling the two halves apart exposes the electrical connectors, a series of pins and sockets, but I do find you need to be very careful when doing this. It's a bit more delicate than the flat PCB connectors we've seen from some other manufacturers, and just in general, it's something you don't want to be unplugging too often. This does let us have a nice look inside the cab though, and the level of detail here is just fantastic. Because it's such an open cab, Rapido have really gone to town on the internals. There's finely moulded pipework and controls, and they're all picked out in the appropriate colours. The sight glasses have a neat striped finish, and yes, you can see printed dials on the gauges too. And not forgetting we have a firebox LED in this model too. The firebox door is actually modelled closed, but the light is visible around the edges, which matches how it would have been on the prototype, I believe. It's a fantastic effect and something just a little bit different for this model, and I'll be showing you what it looks like when lit up later on. When it comes to reconnecting the loco and tender, you just push them together until they click. Again, just be gentle with it so you don't accidentally bend or damage any of those pins. The tender itself is just as nicely done, with a coal load moulded in place and plenty of open space behind showing the top of the water tank. Not forgetting as well that this is the new low tender version, so this area is a completely new tooling. I won't go into the full story because I'm sure many of you already know, but due to a bit of a mix-up, the actual loco was originally paired with this lower tender from 1938 up until 2012. At that point, the NRM actually discovered a more prototypical tender with a much higher outline, and it's been paired with that ever since. And obviously, when the NRM originally commissioned this model, they wanted it to represent how the loco currently looks. Of course, for many people, the lower tender version is what they associate with the Stirling Single, so it's nice that Rapido have gone back and tooled up this new, or rather older tender, which will be perfect for those wanting to model this during, say, its brief 1980s period in Steam. Looking at the back of the tender, you'll find that same high standard of lining and finish, again with that nice two-tone green variation. There's plenty of lamp irons mounted across the rear as well, so lots of options there for those of you who like to add those extra details to your models. So, all in all, this is an absolutely stunning loco. It's not hard to see why Rapido decided to bring the Stirling Single back into their range. It's been a massively popular model which was going for silly prices secondhand, but yeah, with this latest and slightly upgraded release, it's easy to see why. The decoration and detailing really does live up to that museum quality finish that we've come to expect of the models which are associated with Locomotion or the National Railway Museum brands. But of course, as railway modelers, we want our locos to be able to run as well as they look. Now obviously I've already talked about some of the issues I've had with the Stirling Single in particular. Are those going to prevail, or are we past that now? Well, let's get it on the rolling road and we'll find out. So let's say you've just picked up a brand new loco. Your collection is starting to grow and you feel like you need to keep on top of what models you actually own and the condition that they're in. Well, maybe you should consider today's sponsor, Model Rail Inventory. This is an online service that essentially creates a database of your model railway collection all in one place. Not only does it give you interesting statistics about your collection, but you can also keep records of any customizations that you've done, or perhaps more importantly, when each model is due for some maintenance to keep it in tip-top condition. You can make sure everything's running smoothly, and if you ever decide to sell on your model in the future, it could be a big bonus to have the records proving how well you've looked after it over the years.
If this cataloguing your model railway collection sounds like something that might be of interest to you, then head over to modelrail.app to check out all the different features. You can actually get a 90-day free trial to try out the service, and also it only costs $19.99 a year, which actually seems pretty reasonable. Like I said, it's worth having a look. There's a link down in the description, and thank you so much to Model Rail Inventory for sponsoring this video.
Okay, so with the Stirling Single on the rolling road, let's turn up the power and see what we've got. So yeah, this is speed step 1 on the DCC controller, and it's not a really slow crawl, but that said, I don't think you really need that for this loco. You're unlikely to be shunting with it, and honestly for backing down onto some carriages, this is a perfectly acceptable speed, at least in my opinion anyway. You may notice as well that it's not just the big driving wheel that's moving here, the trailing wheel behind it is also powered too. I imagine that's to help give this loco a bit more haulage capacity so it's not just relying on that one big single wheel. Now, I appreciate on camera at times that trailing wheel might look like it's going in the opposite direction. I promise that's not the case, it's just the shutter speed on the camera playing tricks. But yeah, I imagine there's some interesting gearing going on inside to keep everything running smoothly here. And on that note, this is a nice smooth runner, which is absolutely fantastic. Let's not forget that this model also has a built-in stay alive, so having built up a little bit of speed, I'll carefully pick this up off the track and we can see how long it runs for. Yeah, a good few seconds there, which is really handy. Of course, in a larger loco like this, a stay alive isn't as necessary, especially considering that it's only the front 2 bogie wheels that aren't picking up power. But if you've got the space for it, it's great to include it, especially on a sound-fitted model too, which are going to be needing a little bit of extra power. So again, top marks to Rapido here. Okay, so let's slow it down now and we can check it out in reverse. Yeah, again, it's very nice, and the motion is mesmerizing with the large driving wheel going round and round. And again, just turning up the speed to a more normal running pace. It does seem a little bit noisy, but not by much, and honestly, I think it is just down to having that one big single wheel rather than a few smaller ones, so it's nothing I'm particularly worried about. And like I said, I'll mostly be running this with the sound on anyway, which will be more than enough to sort of cover this over. I actually think that this noise is a little bit more heightened on camera just because of how close the microphone is to the model. When you hear it in real life, it's really not as noticeable as it seems on the video. So with the model slowing back down again, let's get the Stirling Single over to the layout so we can see it in action, and of course test out all of the sound functions. So, the Rapido Stirling Single is another massive success from my point of view. It both looks great and of course sounds great as well. Like I said earlier, the sound project has been upgraded and reworked for this new release, which is really nice to know. I can't say how big of a difference it is, as I've not heard the original sound file, but it does now seem to be in line with the more recent sound projects from Rapido. Overall, I think it's just a nice touch that they bothered to go back and make it better rather than just doing exactly the same again. And that really does surmise the Stirling Single overall. It was already a fantastic model, and Rapido have only made it better with their upgrades and additions and things like the low tender version, of course. I imagine for most people this is going to be a Rule 1 purchase, but if you're gonna get a Rule 1 model, then you want something that's gonna stand out, and this certainly fits the bill in every aspect. And of course, Rapido do have some GNR coaches on the way too in their Evolution range, not to mention the J52 in the same livery as well, so perhaps this could be the start of some great Northern themed layouts. Overall though, I think this is a superb model, and I'm really glad Rapido brought it back, as it was obviously popular before, and that seems to have been the case once again. Yes, I had those frustrating moments where I had to send it back, but honestly, the Stirling Single has won me back around with how good it is, and it's not often that a model is able to do that. What do you guys think though? What would your reaction have been if that issue had affected you? And was it even a good step from Rapido to bring back this model, or is there something else from them that you're really looking forward to seeing? Do let me know down in the comments, and like I always say, please do subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more model railway videos in the future. I'm in the middle of filming another big layout build series at the moment, which I think is going to excite a lot of you, so if you don't want to miss that, make sure you're subscribed. In the meantime though, thank you so much for watching everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!